Talk about Sophie Cunningham making some comments about WNBA fans, what she believes fans may not have right about WNBA players, and how a lot of fans feel about, I would assume, hard plays, aggressive plays. I'm not quite sure.
In the world of sports, truth has a strange way of waiting, sitting quietly in the shadows, until someone bold enough, reckless enough, or honest enough finally steps forward and rips the curtain down. For months, the WNBA lived in a reality it thought it controlled, a world where the league believed it held the narrative, the power, and the loyalty of its stars. A world where players stated proudly that they wanted to play at home, that being in America mattered more than money, and that the league was finally on the rise. But all it took was one spark to ignite the truth hiding beneath those layers. One comment, one leak, one confession. And strangely enough, that spark wasn't a billionaire, a commissioner, or a superstar. It was Sophie Cunningham. Sophie's comment started as a casual observation, something meant to bridge the gap between players and fans. She claimed WNBA athletes were misunderstood, that fans saw fight, competitive fire, pushing, barking, scrapping on the court, and assumed that same ferocity defined who players were outside of it. She insisted most women in the league were nothing like their on-court personas. They were soft-spoken, kind, loyal, gentle. "Don't judge us by how we compete," she said. "Get to know us." She meant it as a window into humanity. Instead, she cracked open a debate the league was not prepared to confront. Fans fired back immediately, not with violence or disrespect, but with clarity, cold, organized, unfiltered clarity. The issue, they argued, was never about aggression. They loved aggression. They celebrated physicality. What they didn't tolerate, what they refused to support, was dirty play, the elbows, the late hits, the reckless fouls disguised as hustle, the unnecessary hostility that crossed the line from competitive fire to something uglier. Fans insisted they had no problem with tough players. They had a problem with players who had questionable behavior under the banner of passion. And suddenly, Sophie's attempt to humanize the league felt to many like an attempt to silence legitimate criticism that a crack had formed. Not a minor fracture, but a quiet, growing divide between players and the people who supported them. A league already fragile, already struggling to build a stable long-term fan base, found itself wrestling with something deeper than image. It was wrestling with trust. And while the conversation raged online, something far more powerful, far more dangerous, was taking shape behind the scenes. Something that would make Sophie's controversy look like a spark compared to a wildfire. Because the truth was simple. Fans weren't angry at players for being competitive. They weren't confused by emotion, or misled by intensity, or blinded by highlight reel aggression. Fans understood the game. They understood that sports are emotional, physical, raw. What they didn't understand was why every criticism, no matter how fair or measured, was being treated like an attack. Why every disagreement turned into a battlefield. Why the league spoke of partnership while acting like a fortress. That gap, that tension, became the foundation of the fracture. Players felt misunderstood. Fans felt dismissed. And in between them sat a league constantly trying to convince the world it was growing, even as that world began noticing the cracks beneath the paint. But while social media exploded with arguments, quote tweets, and think pieces, something else was brewing, quietly, deliberately, in the dark corners of sports business where the real power lives. Whispers drifted into group chats. Agents canceled meetings. Executives suddenly went missing from press conferences. A storm was gathering, slow but violent, and it carried the kind of weight that could tilt an entire sport off its axis. Project Beat It AT first, it was only a rumor, a ghost, a name without a face. A new league, a global alternative, a player-first structure. Nobody knew who was funding it, who was organizing it, or whether it was even real. But the timing was suspicious. The league was fighting its fans. Stars were pushing back on criticism. Media was shielding players from accountability. The ecosystem was already unstable. And that's when Project B slipped into the cracks. It didn't announce itself with a press conference. It didn't release promotional artwork or glossy statements. It moved like smoke, quiet, invisible, but suffocating. The first signs were subtle. A veteran guard suddenly withdrawing from free agency talks. A promising rookie privately telling teammates she might have options. Coaches whispering about players acting different. The energy in locker rooms changed. Something was happening, and nobody could quite name it. The WNBA had spent years crafting a narrative of unity, togetherness, sisterhood. But now the players were being approached individually, separately, quietly. Not as a collective, as assets, as investments, as shareholders of their own future. That was the real danger, because fans arguing with players didn't threaten the league's survival. Money did, and Project B had more money than anyone had ever seen in women's sports. Suddenly, the divide wasn't just between fans and players. It was between players and the league itself. The WNBA, for all its progress, still offered salaries that barely scratched six figures. Salaries that forced players overseas, forced them into year-round burnout, forced them to choose between passion and financial stability. But Project B was offering something different, something radical, something impossible to ignore. It was offering freedom, the kind of freedom that changes careers, the kind of freedom that changes families, the kind of freedom that makes loyalty feel like a luxury no working athlete can afford. So while Twitter argued over Sophie's comment, something much bigger was happening behind the curtain. Something that didn't care about public opinion, fan polls, or media narratives. Something that didn't need approval or applause. Something that operated with the cold, quiet efficiency of a financial hurricane, that a new league was rising, and it wasn't asking for permission. It was coming to take everything. The WNBA didn't realize it yet, but Sophie's controversy wasn't the story. It was the warning, the small tremor before the ground splits open. Because once Project B stepped into the light, the tension between players and fans would be the least of their worries. Something far larger was approaching. Something that didn't negotiate to wildfire. Nobody knew exactly who was behind it. Billionaires? Tech giants? Private equity? International investors? Every rumor sounded bigger than the last. But one thing was certain. Project B wasn't aiming to compete with the WNBA. It was aiming to eclipse it. Before the league even fully launched, whispers leaked out. Whispers that turned into panic across front offices and locker rooms. The salaries weren't just competitive, they were absurd. They didn't look like basketball contracts. They looked like generational wealth. What made it even stranger was the silence. No official announcements. No flashy press releases. No corporate rollouts or marketing campaigns. Project B moved like a phantom, visible only through indirect impact, like footprints in sand or shadows under doorways. The more the league stayed quiet, the louder the fear became. Agents began getting calls from unknown international numbers. Players started receiving encrypted documents with NDA warnings thicker than contract pages. And team executives? They were left squinting at the horizon, trying to figure out what storm was forming just beyond their reach. The first clue came from a scout traveling through Europe who overheard a private dinner conversation between two club owners. They spoke in low voices about a North American revolution, a player-first empire, a league designed from scratch. Another hint came when a WNBA star's agent mysteriously canceled all scheduled negotiation meetings, claiming her client needed to evaluate new global opportunities. One by one, small signs began to appear. A few players deleted from their bios. Others posted cryptic emojis, locks, money bags, airplanes, fire. Nobody knew what it meant, but everyone felt the same unsettling shift. Then the salary rumors became numbers. And the numbers made no sense. Players who barely touched the floor in the WNBA were being offered more money than MVPs. Bench players were being promised $2 million minimums. Role players were being told they could earn $5 million, $7 million, even $10 million, depending on bonuses and equity slices. The documents reportedly included financial models showing how players would become partial owners of a league, earning revenue from ticket sales, merch, team valuation increases, and even media deals. It wasn't a job. It was an investment. The kind of deal NBA stars fought for decades to get. The kind of deal women in basketball had never even imagined would exist. But AT first, the WNBA brushed it off as fiction. Every league hears rumors. Every off-season has its drama. But this felt different because nobody could identify the source. Instead of a lone billionaire leading the charge, whispers suggested a coalition, an alliance of global investors who were tired of the slow progress, tired of women being underpaid, tired of supporting a system that refused to evolve. Some insiders believed tech titans were involved, Silicon Valley rebels who wanted to disrupt sports like they disrupted transportation, communication, and commerce. Others believed wealthy European club owners wanted to bring their dominance stateside. One rumor suggested Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds were exploring sports diversification, aiming to turn women's basketball into the next massive cultural export. The possibilities were endless. And every possibility terrified the WNBA. Front offices tried to keep calm, but panic leaked through. Owners started scheduling emergency meetings. General managers whispered to each other during games instead of watching film. Coaches stopped planning multi-year development strategies because they didn't know if their star players would even return next season. For the first time in its history, the WNBA felt small. Not because it wasn't successful, but because something much bigger was rising behind it, quietly, confidently, and with unlimited resources. Meanwhile, the players tried to keep straight faces, but everything had changed. Locker room chatter shifted from scouting reports to salary whispers. Players looked at each other not as teammates, but as future millionaires. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Did they reach out to you? Those who said yes were told, "Don't tell anyone." Not yet. Those who said no were met with sympathetic nods, like someone consoling a friend who hadn't received a life-changing invitation. The league's veterans, the ones who spent decades fighting for salary increases, healthcare improvements, charter flights, and basic respect, felt the weight the most. They knew exactly how much they had sacrificed. They knew exactly how many bones they had bruised, how many games they had pushed through injury, how many off-season overseas miles they had logged just to make ends meet. And now, suddenly, a mysterious league was offering rookies more money than legends ever earned in their entire careers combined. That was the moment the whispers became a threat. Project B wasn't just offering more money. It was offering what the WNBA couldn't: freedom. Freedom from the grind. Freedom from disrespect. Freedom from struggling financially while carrying an entire sport on their backs. Freedom from scrambling between two different leagues just to survive. That IT was the first time in women's basketball history that the power dynamic flipped. The players realized they were the prize. They were the market. They were the product. And they finally had leverage, real leverage, because someone else was willing to pay them what they were worth. For decades, players had been told, subtly, politely, strategically, that they needed the league more than the league needed them. That progress would come slowly. That change required patience. That even the smallest salary increase was a celebration. That they should be grateful for charter flights, grateful for marketing, grateful for visibility, grateful for crumbs in a system where other athletes feasted. But Project B shattered that script. When the first unofficial offer leaked, players didn't even believe it. A minimum salary higher than the WNBA's maximum? Equity shares? Revenue participation? A contract structure built around them instead of around decades-old limitations? It sounded like fantasy, like a rumor designed to stir chaos. But as the whispers grew louder, as the calls became more frequent, as the unofficial meetings moved from hotel bars to private suites, a chilling realization spread through locker rooms everywhere. They were finally in demand. For the first time, women's basketball players were not begging ownerships or unions or sponsors to care. Someone already cared. Someone cared enough to pour millions, billions potentially, into a vision that made them the centerpiece, not the afterthought. And that kind of validation does something to a person. It makes them walk differently, think differently, look differently at the world around them. Suddenly, the WNBA wasn't the only path. Suddenly, the familiar didn't feel comforting. It felt restrictive. Suddenly, loyalty looked like a luxury only available to those who could afford it. And most players couldn't. They loved the WNBA. They respected its history. They honored its fight. But love doesn't erase finances. Respect doesn't pay mortgages. History doesn't guarantee generational wealth. For the first time, players could look at the league and say, "We don't have to stay. And that single sentence cracked the foundation of everything the WNBA had built. Because power is not about who speaks the loudest, it's about who has options. And now, players had options that were bigger, richer, and more ambitious than anything they had ever imagined. Project B didn't just offer money, it offered possibility. And once an athlete realizes they don't need the system, that the system needs them, everything changes everything. The WNBA wasn't just facing competition, that IT was facing extinction-level pressure. And nobody, not the fans, not the owners, not even the players, knew how the league would answer. The WNBA's max salary, which for years hovered around $90,000 before inching upward toward $250,000, suddenly felt microscopic. Because Project B's minimum, its absolute lowest last bench, non-playing a single minute salary, was $2 million. Not a dream, not a future projection, a starting point. 20 times the highest WNBA salaries. And more importantly, Project B wasn't just offering checks. It was offering equity, ownership, a piece of the very machine athletes would be fueling. Suddenly, everything the WNBA players had been saying publicly about loyalty, legacy, growing the game, staying in the U.S., felt increasingly hollow. Because loyalty, no matter how much we romanticize it, has a price. And Project B wasn't just beating the WNBA's price, it was obliterating it. Inside locker rooms, the vibe shifted. Coaches stopped talking about long-term plans because they didn't know if their rosters would exist in 6 months. Agents stopped negotiating with confidence because they weren't sure who to negotiate with anymore. And the players, women who had fought for every inch of visibility, respect, and financial progress, found themselves staring into a new future, one they never imagined would exist. And then came the moment that ripped the truth wide open. Angel McCautry spoke. WNBA royalty, a decorated legend, a voice players trusted. And on the Good Follow podcast, she said what everyone else was too scared to say. The WNBA cannot compete financially, she stated bluntly. No softening, no diplomacy, no league-friendly phrasing, just truth, hard, heavy truth. She described Project B's offers as life-changing, unreachable for the WNBA, and too big to ignore. She explained that for players, especially women who often retire by their early 30s, the paycheck abroad wasn't luxury. It was survival. And then she fired the shot heard around the entire basketball world. If a player can make $5 million somewhere else, why would she stay? What is the incentive? The question hung in the air, sharp as a blade. Because there was no answer, not real one, not one that could compete with millions. And Angel didn't stop there. She shattered yet another narrative, the comforting lie the league had told for years. Players have always said they prefer staying in the U.S., that they want to play at home, that the WNBA is their true professional dream. But Angel called it out. That's BS. We go where the money is. Always have. Her voice didn't waver. She wasn't embarrassing the league. She was liberating the truth. She then painted a picture viewers didn't expect. Istanbul, a city where players weren't just athletes, they were celebrities. They were treated like royalty. She described the food, the culture, the crowds, the nightlife, the fans who filled arenas and followed players like icons. The teams that built facilities better than some NBA practice sites. She made overseas life sound not like a sacrifice, but a dream. Luxury mixed with challenge, adventure mixed with opportunity. And for the first time, people realized the WNBA never had the home court advantage it thought it owned. Players weren't staying because they preferred the U.S. They were staying because they had no other realistic option. Project B was the door no one expected to open. Not just a league, not just a salary bump. It was a new world. A world where WNBA players didn't have to choose between passion and survival. A world where their bodies wouldn't be stretched across 12-month seasons. A world where the financial power finally matched the level of athletic excellence. The tension between fans and players, all sparked by Sophie Cunningham's comments, now feels like a tiny crack compared to the massive fracture forming beneath the league's foundation. Fans argue about dirty play, aggressive behavior, inconsistent officiating. Players argue about respect, contracts, and being misunderstood. But none of those debates matter if the league loses its stars to wealth it cannot possibly match. Behind the scenes, executives scramble. Meetings run late into the night. Owners attempt to find emergency funding. Sponsors demand answers. And players? They quietly weigh the biggest decision of their careers. Do they stay loyal? Or do they survive? And through it all, one question looms larger than salaries, loyalty, or controversy. What happens when a league built on sacrifice finally meets a league built on empowerment? The WNBA is standing on a fault line. The shaking has started. And once Project B lands, the quake will hit full force. Some players will stay, hoping to build the league that raised them. Others will leave, chasing the life-changing wealth waiting abroad. But one thing is certain,